How about if I just start at the beginning? You could be honest.
Because you know what? They have the sweat equity that went into that memory that they're making with their friends and family. And that's what's important with us. And that's what the I Am Real world's about.
Well, that's a great question. You know, one of the best things about a spring food plot is you get a second chance if it fails.
Chasing Giants with Don Higgins. Brought to you by buyafarm.com, your source for farm, recreational properties, rural homes, and more. By tapping into Don's years of experience, dedication, and commitment, Chasing Giants focuses on the techniques, strategies, and dedication needed to harvest one of God's most amazing creations, world-class whitetails. Now, here is Don and co-host Terry Peer.
Well, welcome everyone to Chasing Giants episode 74, brought to you by buyafarm.com. I'm Terry Peer with the cover of North American Whitetail, August 2021 issue, Don Higgins. How about that introduction?
Well, that's probably more than I deserve, but I guess it'll work.
Well, congratulations. It's I know we've known about this for a while, but everybody who just got or is getting ready to get their August issue of North American Whitetail, special moment that you with Mel is on the front cover, second time you being on the cover, but 25 years to the month from your first article being published.
Yeah, that's right. I had my first article published in North American Whitetail in August of 1996. And that just kind of opened the doors for me and started my career in the outdoor industry, if you will. And it's just kind of grown from there. Extremely grateful. Editor Gordon Whittington gave me that first opportunity. But since then, there's been a lot of different editors for different magazine titles that have allowed me to contribute to their magazines. I'm certainly grateful for that. And, you know, it's really humbling to see your picture on the cover of a magazine. It's something that I dreamed about, you know, as a younger deer hunter, but to have it come true, it's kind of like shooting a world-class buck. You dream about it, but then when it happens, it's like, wow, it really happened.
Yeah, so I have not gotten my issue yet, so I haven't gotten my hands on it. Do you have yours?
I do not. Had several people send me pictures of theirs yesterday.
So
that's how I get the picture.
I'm guessing that mine will come here this week, so I know they roll those out. So, but congratulations. Just super proud of you. You know, for a guy that never really aspired to be a writer when he was younger, you've really used that kind of avenue and media outlet to share a lot of lessons for people like me when I was younger and even still today. I know the magazine industry is kind of going away a little bit. It's not as much as it used to be because of, you know, the online stuff, but there's still a lot of people that like to sit there and flip through the pages of a magazine. So,
yeah, you know, writing is kind of my thing. In fact, right before we got on this podcast, I was typing out an article that's going to appear in Deer Hunting, and it opened the doors for a lot of other things, but you know, writing is, well, you know, what I figured out years ago with my writing when I started is, and it's kind of followed through with everything I've done since, is when I would write from the heart, people would notice. It would they would notice that I really believed what I was saying in that article, and I just learned to open up and share my true feelings about things, and you know, I carry that over when I'm speaking in seminars or wherever, or just talking to people one-on-one. I've learned just to spit it out, whatever you're thinking, because a lot of other people are thinking the same thing, but there's plenty of people out there that may share your thoughts, but they never express them. And I think that's one of the things that's wrong with this world today is good people keep their mouth closed, and you know, they don't. They may have the right idea in mind, but they don't do anything about sharing it. And once I figured that out and just started speaking from the heart and writing from the heart, things just kind of exploded for me.
Well, I mean, there's people that are in the outdoor industry that have taken a I don't want to say a faster path because it's not a competition. We had that conversation earlier this week when some of the social media trolls were being trolls, but it's not a competition. But if you look at your journey since that first article was written, there was a lot of opportunities where you could have sold yourself out, or endorsed products for money or fame or publicity that you didn't believe in, or partnered with people that you didn't feel comfortable with. And I think that even though it's taken maybe more years than people who took the shortcuts, the integrity behind where you stand, I think you sleep at night knowing that whatever this ends up being or will ever be from this point forward, you did it the right way with what you believed at all times.
Yeah, for sure. A perfect example is once I started becoming a published author, back in the day, 25 years ago, these companies would, throw out free product to anybody that was writing a lot more freely than they do today. And I've had to turn down at least 3, if not 4 different bow companies who've tried to pull me away from Matthews. And Matthews believed in me from the get-go, and I appreciated that. And I've never shot a single arrow out of another bow except Matthews in 25 years now. So maybe not 25 years, over 20. I don't remember exactly when I came on board with Matthews, but it was over 20 years ago. And once I started shooting their bows, I never shot a single arrow out of another brand. I just felt I owed it to them. And, somebody may have been willing to pay me more money or whatever, but I don't, somebody that's been loyal to me in the past, I just don't burn that bridge without good reason.
Well, it reminded me of a story I read about recently. As some people know, I work for a Japanese manufacturing company, so there's a lot of different Japanese stuff that intrigues me, especially about international business. Have you ever heard the story about Mr. Morita?
No, I
Have I ever
haven't.
told you that?
Nope.
I make a long story short. I don't want to take a lot of time, but I think it's a great analogy to kind of your path thus far. Right after World War II, there was a guy by the name of Morita that was in Tokyo, and he was a telecommunications engineer. And Japan was going through this huge transition of trying to get stabilized after the war, after the bombs were dropped, and decimated a lot of their country. We dropped a ton of napalm in their industrial areas, so they were trying to rebuild. So it took them about, I think, 7 or 8 years off the top of my head, but they actually designed and manufactured the first portable transistor radio. That wasn't, the big boxes that sit on the table.
Uh-huh.
And there was a company that came in from America and wanted to buy the radio, the rights to it, and, mass produce them and sell them. And, the company in Japan was struggling, but the company in the U.S. wanted to put their name on it. And the moral of the story is Mr. Morita just didn't feel comfortable giving up the name of the people that basically grew this company and having another company basically go in and market it, no matter how much money that they threw at the table. So he said no, and the company struggled and finally got off the ground. As the years progressed, over the next probably 40, 50 years, that company was the first one to actually make VCRs, compact disc players, and it took them a little bit longer to get to the end. But before Mr. Morita resigned, he actually renamed the company Sony. So Sony, yeah, so you look at that path of somebody who had to make hard decisions that sacrificed in the short term. I think there's a ton of analogies as we talk about people wanting to get into the outdoor industry, or maybe just even your farm. We talked about the stairs versus the elevator. Everybody wants that quick fix. They want it done tomorrow. But you can't sacrifice the integrity and what you want to stand behind of who you are just to get that short-term fix. So I was reading about that the other week, and when I think about you in the outdoor industry, I think there's a lot of similarities because you've been taken advantage of a lot, you've trusted a lot, but you've also developed a lot of really good relationships that's helped you along the way.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. For sure on all counts. I know I've been taken advantage of, but at the same time, I know that there's been a lot of good people in my corner that had my back when I wasn't around. So it all evens out, and in the end, I think as people really get to know me, they see how loyal I am. And my wife says it, you say it, a lot of my friends say it. Sometimes I'm loyal to a fault, but I'm loyal to the point where I allow people to take advantage of me, and that's happened in the past. But God's put me on this path for a reason, and to go down kind of another rabbit hole on this whole writing story. When I was in high school, I just hated school, just absolutely hated it. And when I was a junior in school, in high school, I actually failed English and had to retake it my senior year. And a lot of people think that this writing just comes natural. And I was smart enough to pass it. I was just lazy and just hated what I was doing. And that's why I failed it. But, probably one of the reasons I became a decent writer, I guess, is because I would read so much. And, when I was younger, I would buy every single hunting magazine that was made. I was just so eager to learn and become a better hunter that if it had a deer article in it, I was buying the magazine. And, for 20 years, I worked in a factory, and you ask the people that I worked with, and they'll tell you that half the time I was walking around with a hunting magazine folded in half in my back pocket. So I think it's the reading that made me a better writer. And here I am today. And I haven't seen the article yet, North American Whitetail, but I did mention that, I don't know how it's been edited, but I did mention, it was my 25th anniversary of writing for that magazine.
Well, it's a long way to go about it, but I think all the listeners can join in with me, and it's not something to kiss your butt or, I think that we appreciate the unbiased and sincerity with what you do, both with your writing, your consulting, any of your outlets, that even this podcast. People don't necessarily have to agree with you, but they don't have to worry about it being biased. So congratulations on your 25th year of writing, and congratulations on your second cover of North American Whitetail. That's pretty cool.
Well, thanks, Terry. I appreciate it, and I appreciate everybody that's reached out and congratulated me on social media or text or whatever. Just the friends I've made are the most important thing that's ever come from this, and I just hope to make a lot more.
Well, we got a couple good things to talk about as far as deer hunting goes, and tied to this time of the year that I want to pick your brain a little bit about tonight. And let's start with taking a little bit different twist to the segment we did last week about understanding antler growth in velvet season. So right now, we kind of started it up and teed it up last week that everybody's getting these velvet pictures, but what does it mean? How much is that antler going to grow? How can we, the anticipation is huge, but understanding what we're looking at with cameras and pictures right now. With this velvet growth, how does the weather affect antler growth where we're sitting right now this time of year?
Well, there's a little bit of debate on that. I know, for example, my buddy Cameron Coble from Iowa, he says that a dry year produces bigger bucks. And he's got the data to kind of back that up. However, I've got another good friend who is featured in my second book, Real World Whitetail Icons, and that's Lee Mitchell. Lee Mitchell's a wildlife biologist who manages he manages a property in Texas, and he manages a big piece of public land here in Illinois for the Army Corps of Engineers. And the piece that he manages here in Illinois, I know he collects a lot of data. And that data is based on, harvest statistics off of that site, that public land site here in Illinois. And he measures things like body weight, gross antler score, ages of bucks, etc. And during 2012, when we had the extreme drought of 2012, I don't remember the exact figures. We need to get Lee on this podcast sometime because he's just a wealth of knowledge.
Yeah,
but during the drought of 2012, the body weights of the bucks were down by a significant percentage, and the antler size of the bucks was down by a significant percentage. And I mean, this is not just random data. This guy is precise about everything that he does. He's probably the best public land deer hunter that I've ever met, and the reason I featured him in that book, he's killed a lot of good bucks on public ground. In fact, he almost hunts exclusively on public ground, and he's done it not only here in Illinois, but he actually grew up a Southern boy and in Georgia, killed some good bucks on public land down there. But his data, kind of goes against what Cameron believes. And at least during the 2012 rut, now that was an extreme example or extreme dry conditions in 2012 versus, your typical summer dry period. There's also the train of thought that bucks grow better during wet years. And the theory is that those plants, they grow better, and it's that young, tender growth that the deer feed on. That's really nutrient dense, and there's just more of it, when it's wet. My theory, and something I've taken from the captive deer herd, is, a buck's antlers is almost like a radiator. When it's hot in the summer, there's a lot of blood flow in those velvet antlers, and it actually will help cool the buck. That blood flow gets up there in that antlers, and it actually helps cool it. And the increased blood flow to that antler, is carrying nutrients. There's nutrients in that blood that feeds that growing antler. And by the way, antler is the fastest growing form of animal tissue there is. A lot of cancer research has looked into antler growth, because cancer is also a very fast growing, tissue in the animal world. But I know of captive deer breeders who, in their buck pens, they will not allow their bucks to have shade. They will keep them bucks out in the hot sun, because when those bucks are out in the hot sun, the antler, or the blood flow to that growing antler, increases, and they believe it makes for larger antlers. So, I don't know what to believe, but I can tell you that cooler weather is not good. But as far as wet or dry, I think an extreme either direction is not good. I know Cameron's got some pretty compelling evidence for dry, because basically when it's dry, the plants don't grow as much, and the nutrients within that plant are condensed into less tissue.
More concentrated.
And exactly.
So every bite's
and
got more
that
in
makes
it.
total sense to me.
Yep.
But anyway, it's real interesting that some of those captive breeders would keep their bucks in pens with no shade whatsoever to increase antler growth. So I know hot conditions are definitely good. As far as rainfall or lack of rainfall, I'm kind of still on the fence about that.
Well, I think it's fascinating to think about. Very difficult for the average guy to draw a conclusion about it, other than just notice trends. But I think we can all agree that extreme conditions, one side or another, and the additional stress that imposes is not a good thing.
Absolutely, stress is a killer. When it comes to antler growth, that buck needs to be as stress-free as possible.
Yep.
Okay,
that's interesting. But yeah, I think we need to try to not only get him, but maybe even Dr. Strickland back on at some point. We promised we would do that here before too long.
Yep.
If you look at fall food plot seed right now, the team at Real World's office has been absolutely we didn't have much of an off season in between spring and fall. The amount of orders that are coming in is going pretty crazy. I think we've started seeing a lot of people on social media bragging about going ahead and posting or planning their food plots right now. And if I've gotten 60 this last week of people asking about them planning their fall food plots this week. What are you thinking?
Well, I think planting them too early is one of the worst things you can do, actually, because what happens is those plants, they get too mature and they lose their palatability. So by the time hunting season rolls around, the deer actually may have moved off of your plots to a different food source. They like those young, tender plants, and you want to time it, with the opening of your deer season in the fall, which for most bow hunters, that's going to be October 1st or thereabouts. And, a good rule of thumb that I've always promoted for fall plots is if you live along Interstate 70 cuts right through the heart of the country, through Columbus, Ohio, Indianapolis, St. Louis, Kansas City. If you live along that Interstate 70 corridor, then you want to plant your plots around September 1st, give or take a few days either way, but around September 1st. And for every 100 miles you move north of Interstate 70, you want to move that up by a week. So if you're 200 miles north, then you want to move it up by 2 weeks. If you're 400 miles north, I know there's some guys like in Michigan, upper Wisconsin, Minnesota and such that late July is when they need to be planting them just based on where they're at. But for the majority of the country, that's not the case.
Yeah, those guys are getting heavy frost October 1st, October 10th, something like that.
Yep.
Yeah, so I think there's a lot of people that get fooled by saying I need these huge plants by the time season starts, and I think that's a little short-sighted. If anything, you want the fresh, tender, young growth. And if you're planting a fall food plot that has a lot of diversity in it, I mean, we talk about real-world stuff a lot, but a product like Deadly Dozen that's got 12 varieties, if they're designed and made properly, meaning the food plot blend, not everything in that 12 plants or seed types in there are going to be palatable at the very beginning. So at different times of the year, those things are peaking. So you don't have to worry about if it's a good blend with a lot of diversity in it. You don't have to worry about the deer coming in and mowing it off immediately. They're going to be picking, bits and pieces of what's palatable at that time. But you don't necessarily want it to mature right before the rut or, die off and start rotting before December comes in where they don't have any late season food.
Right. And, the thing of it is, once deer season opens, it's not like those plants stop growing.
Right.
So, October 1st comes around, the bow season's open, but the plants are still growing. So you want to time it where those plants are young and tender at the opening of season. And as food sources dry up in the fall, then your plot should draw in more and more deer.
So the next question that we get hammered with, absolutely hammered with, is what fertilizer do I put down when I go to plant my food plots? Just, that's all the information we get.
Yeah, I've heard that one so many times. I wish I had $1 for every time I heard it. And there is nobody on this planet that can answer that question without a soil test. And I use that response so often because people say, I don't have time for a soil test. Just give me some general information. Well, there are so many different soils and, nutrients within the soil that need to be at the proper level that if your soil is already high in a nutrient, the last thing you want to do is go and add more.
Right. And
it all starts with the pH, really. If nothing else, you need to get your pH right. And if the pH is not right, it really doesn't matter about the other nutrients because the plant can't utilize it. So you got to start with getting the pH right. And there's absolutely no way whatsoever to know without a soil test.
All right. So we're going to back up just a little bit. But I want to make sure people understand this. If your pH isn't right, you could go in and spend $2,000 on a 3-acre food plot with different fertilizer and it not do a bit of good by what you just said with your pH is right. For those who don't understand this, just walk us through on what neutral pH is, and so people understand that. And the only way to know that is to do the soil test.
Yeah, a neutral pH is 7.0, and if you're above 6.0, then you're pretty good. But you bring that pH up by adding lime to your soil. And once you get the pH right, you don't have to go in and add lime every year in most cases. But sometimes, it may take 2 or 3 tons of lime per acre. And if you don't have that pH right, well, then just forget it, because like you just said, Terry, you're wasting your money on everything else that you're putting out there. So that pH is the first thing you need to check and correct. And then you can check all your N, P, and K.
The closer the pH of your soil is to neutral, the more nutrients the plant will absorb out of the dirt. So you could have high nitrogen, high phosphorus, everything else could be there in your soil, but if you're not neutral on your pH, it doesn't transfer to the plant. So the closer we can get it to there, and it might take 2-3 years to get it to where you need to be. And then there's other things that you can do about building soil that we've talked about before on the podcast. But the other thing that I think it's hard for people, and especially when food plotters go to the extension office or maybe the university ag extension or the extension office, and say, I want to plant this food plot of Deadly Dozen. It's got 12 varieties. Here's my and it's really hard for the agriculture guys to say, here's the recommendation of what you need when there's 12 different types of plants in a bag. So what can food plotters do? They go and get their soil test and say, let's just use Deadly Dozen for an example. It's got 3 cereal grains, winter peas, and then 8 different types of brassicas. Where do they zone in on what the recommendation would be with that kind of diversity?
Well, again, first it starts with the pH of the soil. But once you get that, then you really kind of need to pick something out of that mix. And I always suggest looking at those cereal grains. Go to your local fertilizer co-op and get the soil test done. Take the results of that soil test to your local ag co-op and say, here, I'm going to be planting cereal grains, oats, wheat, rye, whatever. What do I need? Yep. And they'll be able to help you.
Yep. So if we focus in, say with the Deadly Dozen, if we say we want to fertilize for, pick the cereal grains, everything else will pretty much thrive with that. Yep. I have and I might be completely out of whack on my theory. I think that too much nitrogen in soil that has brassicas in it actually extends how long the plant gets palatable, or how long it takes for it to get palatable. I think the more nitrogen you have in it, and the reason I say that is 2 different examples. We have a lot of old tobacco fields around here in Kentucky that you have to torch the ground for tobacco with nitrogen. So, farmers for years after years after years would put a ton of nitrogen back on these fields, on these ridge tops. And you could go in and you could have, in these old tobacco fields, you could have the biggest bulbs you've ever seen. Like I could make the brochure picture, the volleyball size bulbs in these plots, and the deer won't touch them. But I can go off to the side in the old clay hillside here in Kentucky and mow off a spot and till it and plant it in there without doing anything, and they mow them off. And the only thing I can think of is the hair fibers of those root plants like turnips and tillage radishes and everything go down into the hard pan and pull all that nitrogen from where it's been farmed for so long, and it keeps that nitrate level so, and basically it keeps the plant bitter for longer. It takes either more maturity or colder weather to bring it down. And I'm not a scientist, I'm not an agronomist, but that's my theory anyway. There was another place that Wes Delks planted last year that was where they sprayed liquid manure from a hog farm in, and I think he planted, what was it, like 3 acres of Deadly Dozen, and those deer went in and mowed every cereal grain and every winter pea out of there and never touched those brassicas. And then the field right next to it, they mowed all of it off, but it was where they sprayed all that liquid manure on. So I think that people, they think that putting more nitrogen on it to get the big bulb might be helping them. In those cases, I think less nitrogen might be a little bit better.
For sure. The nitrogen will definitely help with plant growth, but it also brings those nitrate levels up, which makes the plant bitter or less palatable to the deer. I never put nitrogen on a fall planted plot.
Yeah.
So.
Well, so hope that helps people. If you're impatient and you're worried that you're being late with your fall food plots, you got plenty of time. I mean, you got 6 weeks here for most of the country. I know it's hard for people like that opening up in Kentucky like I am. We got to cheat it a little bit and squeeze it up. The other thing that I've asked you about before, and if I have, say, a 2-week window where I want to plant food plots, is it more important to plant it around moisture or rain in the forecast than it is necessarily the 2-week window?
It depends on the method of planting and the season that you're having or the year you're having. Like this year, right now there's a lot of moisture in the ground where I'm at. We've got probably 10 inches of rain or more in July. Using a drill like the Genesis drill where you don't have to break the soil, especially if you got any kind of ground cover at all. You don't have to worry about that rain there as much. But now if you're going to disc or till up your soil and broadcast your seed and then roll it in or whatever, then those timely rains can be a lot more critical.
Yep. Well, before we move on to this week's Don's Best and Worst of the Week segment, I think everybody needs to know that you kind of got declined and weren't allowed access to hunt some properties you were after. So it's not like you got free reign of wherever you go. You got turned away this week a couple times, didn't you?
I did. Last week on the podcast, I was pretty happy that I got permission on 2 new properties and was batting 1,000 for the week. I mentioned that I had a couple more properties I was going to try to get permission on this past week. And, well, I went and talked to both landowners and was denied both times. And I just wanted to share that because I think sometimes people get the idea that I'm living in a different world than they are. And I promise you, I get turned down more than I get permission. If I get permission twice in a week, that's noteworthy. And this week I was shut out. I didn't get permission on anything that I asked for. So part of it.
Yeah. So it's not like we don't have to face the same struggles that everyone else does. So still putting up trail cameras, or do you have all of them deployed yet?
I've got probably, I don't know, pushing 40 of them out, but I've got a few more to get out this week. Not many. I'll probably put out, I don't know, 4 or 5 more, and then I'll pretty much be set for the rest of the summer. And, one thing that I've really pushed, Terry, is not to get those trail cameras out too early. And because you get a picture of a buck, it might be the only picture that you get of him. And I had a perfect example today. I went and checked a couple of cameras, and on the 11th, I had a really nice buck came by, and he seen my camera, and he literally spooked. I mean, you could see him on the react once he seen that camera, and he blew out of there. You could see him running away. And that was the only picture or series of pictures I got. Once that buck seen that camera, it was over, and he hasn't been back. That's why I preach to people, don't put your cameras out too early, because if I would have done that, say, early June, he wouldn't have been growed out enough that I could have told anything about him. And I'd have got my one chance, and he was gone. I'd never had any idea how big he is.
Interesting.
The way it happened, he had enough antlers that I know he's going to be worth trying to keep an eye on. We're going to have to put some new cameras up in different locations in that area, but it'll definitely be worth it.
Gotcha. All right. Well, I'm excited to hear what the best and worst of the week is from you. See if we can get on maybe a little rant here.
A little bit.
I'm sure I might be able to fire you up about something. Maybe I'll say something about your vaccination post and your comparison to insulin. That seemed to get a few people riled up, but we won't go there tonight.
Well, you know me. I've got an opinion about everything. And the thing of it is, though, folks, you and I can disagree. I'm not talking about Terry either. I'm talking about any of you listening. We can disagree on a topic today, and tomorrow we can agree on the next one. And there's no hard feelings on my end. I just as soon hear how you really feel is just to have you nodding your head like a bobblehead to agree with me. So if you disagree with me on this topic, maybe the next time we'll agree. But anyway, what I picked out is the best thing that I seen for the week, and I'm sure a lot of listeners seen it on social media, was there was George Floyd memorial that was painted on the side of a building that got hit by lightning and destroyed. You see that, Terry?
I can't believe this is what you picked. Actually, I can.
Well, you know, when society is so far down the toilet that we make a hero out of a drug addict with a rap sheet as long as your arm, you can only expect that God's going to only go so long without reaction. And I thought it was only fitting that memorial got blown apart with a bolt of lightning. And I know some people are just going to brush this off as coincidence. I think it was more than coincidence. I think God Almighty was speaking, and he's not happy about the whole George Floyd incident and making an idol out of someone like that, or anyone really. But that was just totally over the top, and God spoke loud and clear with that lightning bolt.
All right, so what's the worst?
I thought maybe you was going to throw your 2 cents in there too.
Nah, I got nothing. I think you're absolutely right though, but
well, that was the best thing I've seen on social media this week. So the worst, what's the worst? Well, there's a Facebook page called Whitetail Snipers, and some of the listeners are probably members of that page, as am I. And someone, I don't know who, posted a photo of a buck, and this buck had 3 dots on his side marked A, B, and C. And the question was, where would you aim, point A, point B, or point C? The buck was 25 yards away, and you're 20 feet up in a stand. Well, the buck was quartering to and looking right at the hunter, because he was looking right at the person.
So
it
was a quartering to shot, and they were telling you asking you which spot to aim
at. And I responded that any ethical bow hunter would not take any of those shots.
Oh, I bet some people love that.
I had a lot of people that agreed with me.
Yeah.
I thought that was great, but what I thought was really disgusting was some of the comments, and bow hunting has changed so much from when I started, 40 some years ago. And a lot of people are trying to make up for lack of hunting skills with equipment. Mechanical broadheads is a perfect example. They can't get a regular, fixed blade broadhead to fly good. So what do? They go to mechanical, which are nothing but cruel pieces of junk that should be in the garbage. And the other thing they do is they take poor shots. And this picture depicted a terrible shot angle, just absolutely terrible, with the deer looking right at you, quartered at you sharp. And people were going on about how that's a dead deer, stupid, just one ignorant comment after another. And I think it was the most disgusting post that I seen on the internet this week.
It gets back into being disciplined enough to take an ethical shot. I mean, it's sad that someone would ever say throw an arrow at it and we'll find it later. Just that is sickening.
There was a lot of bad comments on that post, and it quickly got put on my notes to be the bad example for this week.
Well, and I think, I can't speak for you, but I've been there, and some of those lessons you have to learn the hard way. I mean, you might get away with them 1 time, 2 times, but sooner or later, if that is how you're going to hunt and take shots and not set up your stands and shooting lanes to where you're not doing that, sooner or later you're going to lose a buck of a lifetime, or a target buck. And not only that, but wound or not be able to recover an animal. I think I'm not perfect. I've done it. I've regretted it. If anybody watched the Whitetail Cribs episode that they filmed when Chad and Cameron came to my house and videoed my trophy room, I talked about it. I mean, the first buck that I shot at with a bow, it was too dark. I couldn't see the deer anymore. Let an arrow fly. I might as well had my eyes closed, and ended up shooting it right in the butthole. It was facing directly away from me. In that case, it turned out as a story, but it's been a moment that I've regretted ever since. Because that could have gone completely the other way. So I think for the most part, every hunter can say that they've taken a bad shot. But you got to learn from it. You got to grow.
Yeah, for sure. When I was younger, I took some shots that I would never take today. And but the thing of it is, I became disciplined, and I can't remember the last buck I lost. I mean, I know it's been over 20 years, probably 25 years. Mm-hmm. And I can't even remember it. That's how long it's been. Right. So the thing of it is, we just got to grow and mature as hunters and become more ethical. And we can't rely on equipment to make up for lack of hunting skills. We need to spend as much time sharpening our hunting skills as we do, jacking around with our equipment. Right. And when we do that, then we can get those deer in close and get a good, clean, ethical shot at them.
Yep, I agree. Well, we're going to move on to the BioFarm segment in just a second, but you and I haven't talked about this. But when we did the live recording on Facebook for the Lester's Feet drawing, was that 2 weeks ago? It was 2 weeks ago. Yep. It wasn't last week, 2 weeks ago. We had over 10,000 people between then and now who've watched that episode on Facebook. And, obviously we got our large number of people who listen on the podcast platforms. So we had a little bit of a question for you, and you guys can send me a message on social media. We have the opportunity. I'm not going to be next week for next week's episode. If you guys want us to wait till Monday, I will be with Don on Monday night. So if we delay one night, we could probably do this on Facebook or YouTube Live. So if you would like us to do that, drop me a note. If not, we'll do the audio-only version on Sunday night before I head up on Monday. So I think we have a chance to be in person on it and maybe do video for next week's episode. So if you want to see that, let us know. We want to do it the way you all like it. But with 10,000 people who watched that last episode, we might need to start trying to figure out a way to do this if people would rather watch. So give us some feedback on that. And right now we'll move on to the biofarm.com property of the week.
Biofarm.com is your source for farm, recreational properties, rural homes, and more. Now, here is Don Higgins with this week's featured property.
Okay, this week's featured property is 60 acres in Jackson County, Illinois, and it's located on a place called Campbell Pond. Campbell Pond is one of the best duck and goose hunting areas in southern Illinois. This property actually touches Campbell Pond on, I believe it's the west and the north sides. So there's some fantastic waterfowl hunting there. But there's also almost 60 acres of timber, and most of that is mature timber. A small part of it has been timbered, but the majority of it has marketable timber on it. The majority of all these properties around Campbell's Pond are privately owned, and it's pretty rare for one to come up available. But here's an opportunity if you're looking for a property in that area. You'd have an opportunity to hunt not only your waterfowl, but deer, turkey, small game, and such. It's also be a good place to build a hunting lodge or whatever. This is located near Elkville, Illinois. And if you're interested, you can talk with agent Mark Kennedy. And Mark's phone number is 618-924-1747. Just tell Mark that you're interested in the 60 acres in Jackson County on Campbell Pond.
All right. Well, we want to thank the folks at BioFarm for their support of the podcast. We hope everybody is watching their Facebook page. And if you're interested in this property in Jackson County, Illinois, please go visit biofarm.com. And Mark Kennedy's number, you want to repeat that one more time, Don?
Yeah, Mark's number is 618-924-1747.
All right. Well, before we move on to the listener-submitted questions, I'm not going to ever do a best and worst of the week, but I do have a best that I want to brag about real quick. Is that okay?
Yeah.
Our buddy Eric Perry and Rich Hickson, but I think Eric did most of the heavy lifting, had an event yesterday down in Southeast Ohio, and to raise money for his local volunteer fire department called the Great Outdoor Extravaganza, and just put his heart and soul into this thing, and was able to cut a donation check both to his local fire department and to Lester's Feet. And I sent him a message yesterday, and because I knew how much he was stressed out about it. He worked so hard putting this big event together. Our buddy Chad Sylvester drove like 4 hours to go do a seminar on trail cameras. Tate Hale spoke. He's the former college athlete that had to have his leg amputated. Rich Hickson did a food plot seminar. They did, I'm not sure if it was a hunter safety class for youth or what it was, but they had a program the entire day yesterday. And Lester's Feet board members, Austin and Ann Razor, went up to help support it. They gave away a bunch of prizes and raised a lot of money that's going to help do a lot of good. And I told Eric, I said, even as much as you stressed out about this, it's a perfect example about how God can use us no matter what we're doing, whatever our passion is, whatever we're affiliated with. God can use you to do something good and be a blessing to somebody else. So congratulations to Eric. And I know Rich Hickson was a big part of that. Just fantastic. Good job, guys. Just blessed to be able to call you guys friends and have other people answer the calling to try to do something good.
Yeah, we appreciate everybody that stepped forward for that event and donated their time and resources. So we all pitch in and do a little, we can accomplish a lot.
All right. So what do you got for questions this week?
I got some good ones,
All right.
Terry, and one of them at the end is going to be real good. But
okay.
We'll start off with one from Mark Paris from Ardmore, Tennessee. And Mark says, Dear Don and Terry, I love your podcast. My question involves summer trail camera placement versus in-season trail camera placement. I hunt in Northeast Ohio, and I do not bait, but several neighbors around me do feed deer. How would you set up your trail cameras in July differently than in October? I use cell cameras to decrease human intrusion. Thank you. Well, Mark, first of all, if I was in an area such as Northeast Ohio that where you hunt, where it was legal to do so, in the summer I would at least have cameras on mineral licks. I think that's a great way to get an inventory of the bucks that are on a property is through these mineral licks, and you don't necessarily have to use bait, corn, or whatever to feed the deer, but these mineral licks not only are good for the deer, but it's a great way to get your trail camera photos. And when you move into the fall, towards the end of the season, I moved my cameras, or the end of the summer rather, I moved my cameras from summer feeding areas to fall rutting areas. And a lot of those cameras are going to be put on mock scrapes or rope scrapes that I've talked about so often. It's just, you got to look at what the deer are really focused on that time of the year. In summer, they're feeding heavily as the bucks are growing those antlers, and the does are raising fawns, and they're all trying to put on fat for the winter. They're really going to be feeding heavy, and that's where you want to concentrate your cameras. And then as we move into the fall, the rut starts taking precedence, and that's what the bucks are going to be doing especially. So, any funnel areas or scrapes or things like that are perfect places for fall locations for trail cameras.
Good deal.
Anything to add there, Terry?
Well, I don't have anything to add because this is probably one of the biggest areas that we're quite a bit different on. With me being in Kentucky, I can feed all year round, and I throw the protein to them every day of the year. So I don't have the situation like Mark's talking about unless it's in Illinois, and I really don't move cameras up there. the places that I put cameras in, I put enough of them that they're there all year. So I have them basically on the food source and on the hanging scrapes. I'm not moving them, so I go in and put them in both places. I run enough cameras, I don't have to move them. So I'm not kind of in the same boat on that.
Okay. We'll move on to the next one from Drew Peterson from Albion, Michigan. Drew says, "Hi, Terry and Don. I have a question regarding Sunday night show on spring food plots." This question was submitted a while back, and I just dug it out because I liked it. But
Okay.
this is something I've always wondered as I use glyphosate, pre-emergence, etc. You mentioned one called the Intimidator, which is 3 chemicals in one. That is a pre-emergent, I believe. But the general question is, do these chemicals we use affect the meat, the venison, the turkey that we're eating later? How do we know these chemicals are not getting into our deer? What does science say? Are we shooting ourselves in the foot, so to speak? Would love to hear what you guys think. What's Don's chemical guy knows, and any research you've done or the MSU guys have done on this topic. The food plot topic is a premier topic in any deer management program. Are there other ways that you personally use to control weeds that are effective? Thanks much, Drew. Long-time listener. Okay, Drew, we appreciate your question, and I picked it out for a reason, and I think I can look at this from a little different angle, and maybe an angle that you and some of the other listeners have never thought of before. But, you know, in the course of say, its life or a year or whatever, a deer eats a lot of different things. And the amount of time that deer is, or the amount of food that he's getting from a food plot, even in areas that are heavily managed, really is minimal if you think about it. He'll spend as much time eating natural browse and more importantly in ag fields. And there is no way that we are ever going to stop the agricultural industry from using various chemicals, herbicides, insecticides, whatever. You know, just recently I was driving down the road and there was a crop duster spraying a cornfield. And as that crop duster came across the road in front of me, right below him, 2 bucks ran out. So, you know, that crop duster was dropping spray right on the backs of those deer that were out in this giant ag cornfield. As food plotters, I think it's so minimal, any impact that we would have if we stopped doing this. I know there's been some videos put out on social media lately about treated seeds and things. But, you know, the food plots compared to agricultural crops are so minimal. I mean, we're not even 0.1% as far as acreage. And the effect that we're having with our food plots is so minimal that even if we did stop using chemicals altogether, and to answer your question, I do not know of a good substitute unless you want to get out there and pull weeds by hand. But we're going to have so minimal impact, even if we stop using chemicals, that I just think it's a moot point.
Yeah, I don't have any science or skill set to stand behind it, but you're right. I mean, even with how much I supplemental feed and how many deer, I mean, I can pull up my cell camera as we're talking right now and see how many deer are even at the feeder right now just after dark. It is just a drop in the bucket compared to what they're eating for browse right now, and what they're eating on every other ag field around me. So, drop in the bucket.
Right.
But good question.
Yeah, so
good question, Drew. I mean, it's a hot topic right now. I know we've gotten a lot of questions here recently because of some information posted out about, you know, how our soybeans are treated and stuff like that. So, good question, Drew. We appreciate it.
Yeah. Yeah, and I picked that question. It's a question that's been submitted a while back, but it just kind of fit right in with a topic that's pretty hot on social media at the moment.
Well,
and kind of fit right in. So.
Circling back to...
I'll move on to the last question. This one here might take a little bit longer to answer.
Hang on 1 second, though, before you do that. The first part of his question, he mentioned the Intimidator residual. Have you been happy with that? Is the weed still under control in your food plots?
Yeah, I mean, it did a fantastic job, especially on the water hemp. I don't see a single water hemp plant in those
Good deal.
spots that I sprayed with that Intimidator.
Good deal. All right, last question.
Last question comes from Andrew Justin Westcott from Rock Hill, South Carolina.
South Carolina.
Andrew says, "Good afternoon, gentlemen. First, thank you again for taking the time to read my question. You have mentioned on your website that you only provide land consults in the Midwest region and that every consultant has a region where their service is of more value than anywhere else. For the listeners and followers of your podcast who are not in the Midwest, myself, for example, in South Carolina, how do you recommend finding and selecting a wildlife consultant in your area? I have always been a recreational hunter who lacks enough experience to get a sense if the possible consultant is not providing me with accurate and quality information other than comparing it to the materials and education you provide us with your podcast and educational channel on YouTube. Now that I have purchased my first tract of land, I would love to have someone help guide me into developing my property to be the best it can be for my goals. When selecting a consultant, are there particular questions we should be asking? Are there red flags that we should be immediately looking for when you speak with them? Unfortunately, I have not been able to locate anyone in my area who has hired a consultant to review their experience and outcome. Thank you again for your time." This is Andrew, I appreciate the question. This is something that's near and dear to my heart. I want to state right from the beginning that, folks, I've already got more consulting work than I can possibly do. And I've got a bigger list right now than I typically would have in November for this coming winter. I don't need the work, so I'm speaking to you from the heart. I'm not speaking to you to try to gain business. The first thing that I think anyone should do that's thinking about hiring a whitetail consultant is you need to determine what your goals are. What do you want to accomplish? What do you want this consultant to help you accomplish? And if you just want to see more deer, have better habitat on your property, there's a number of consultants that can probably help you. If you're wanting to kill older, mature bucks, you need to find somebody that's doing it in your region of the country. Or it doesn't have to be the same state, but, in the same type of terrain. I'm just going to go out on a limb here and know I'm going to make a few people mad, but I can tell you that it seems like just in the past week, for example, I think I've seen 2 new whitetail consultant operations advertised on social media, ones that I'd never heard of before. And when I see those, I always check them out and look at their credentials and where they're located and things like that. And I also had a call this week or a conversation with a consulting client of mine in Ohio who mentioned that his cousin hired another consultant, and they were kind of comparing notes, and he was at his cousin's farm, and they was taking a little tour, and his cousin showed him one of the stands that the consultant told him to hire. And he asked him, he says, "Well, what wind direction do you use to hunt this stand?" And the cousin said, "Well, he never said anything about wind direction. We just hung a stand in that tree." And he said, "Well, what about access routes? How do you get in and out of this stand?" And he said, "Well, this guy's philosophy is that when you're going in the morning in the dark, you walk in the woods because the deer are out in the field. And in the evening when you're leaving, you do the same. But in the afternoon when you're coming in, you walk across the food source because the deer are in the woods." and that's this guy's whole philosophy. Well, here's my point. This guy is a well-established consultant. He's been doing it for years, probably, I don't know, 15, 20 years at least. He's got dozens, if not hundreds of clients. A lot of Amish clients hire this guy. And he doesn't have a clue what he's doing. And I've been on multiple farms where this guy has been, and his advice is literally worthless, and people are paying thousands of dollars for advice, and then they buy into it. And the thing of it is, just because you pay somebody doesn't mean you're getting good advice. You need to define your goal, and then find somebody that's been successful at that. If your goal is to kill mature bucks, you need to find somebody that's done that. One thing I want to point out that you read my website, and some of that information has been on there a few years. this past year, I consulted from Kansas all the way to New Jersey and every state in between. And I know New Jersey is not the Midwest. The year before, I was out in Connecticut, Massachusetts, and as far west as Kansas again. A few years ago, my daughter took a job in Connecticut, and I moved her out there. And as I was out there on the East Coast, I recognized that is not a whole lot different than where I'm from in Illinois. The terrain, the cover, the plant species. I know there's some differences there. But the whole concept of how I try to set up a property, I recognize that it would work there just as well as it works in the Midwest. And over the last 2 winters, I've branched out a little farther into the East Coast, into states that I once thought I would never go to, simply because I had seen that type of terrain before. I always start with a aerial photo. If you call a consultant and he's just ready to put your name on the list and take your money, keep on looking. You should be interviewing him, and he should be interviewing you. Anytime that I have a client contact me, I ask for an aerial photo of their property, and I've got a series of about 10 questions about them and their hunting experience and their goals and their property, the neighboring properties, the area. I want to get a good feel for their situation, and if I don't think I can help them, I tell them so, and I have a very candid conversation with them before I ever take a dime of their money. To get real specific in your area, I do not know of a consultant in the Southeast that I could recommend. In fact, there's not too many consultants I would recommend anywhere, but there are some really good ones in other parts of the country. I just don't happen to know any in the South or Southeast where you're at, but I think you need to reach out through social media or whatever and talk to people in your region. Georgia, North Carolina, those states that border South Carolina there. And surely there's somebody down there that would be a good fit for you. And if you still can't find someone, reach out to me in a private message or email, and I will see what I can do. I've got a couple of guys in mind that might be able to help you out, but I just don't know if they do consulting or not. So anyway, that's kind of my spiel on consultants. I see more and more of these guys going into the business that, in my opinion, have no business being in the business. They don't have the credentials behind them, and I don't want to rain on anyone's parade. This is America. I applaud people for being entrepreneurs and trying to start their own business, but you need to know what you're doing before you hang your shingle up and start taking people's money. Thanks for the question, Andrew. We certainly appreciate it. I hope I didn't step on anybody's toes too hard, but just think some brutal honesty is due. I see a lot of people that I feel are getting ripped off, and it don't set well with me. So hopefully the advice that I gave here will allow everyone to do their due diligence and do their homework before they hire some of these people.
All right, fantastic. Thanks, Andrew. All right, Don. I'm going to be traveling up your way. I think if people want to see it on Facebook or YouTube Live, we can probably arrange that as long as we can do it Monday night, don't you think?
Yeah, that shouldn't be a problem at all.
So let me know what you all want us to do. If you want it on Sunday night to stay on your regular scheduled programming, I know a lot of guys listen to it Monday morning going to work. We can do that. If you'd rather wait and us do Facebook Live on it, and maybe get some little bit of interaction on Monday, maybe we can do that. So give us some feedback on that. So outside of that, Don, I ain't got nothing else tonight.
Okay. Well, you got a big week planned, or?
I think I got to run up to Indianapolis Wednesday night for a meeting, but outside of that, I'm just gonna keep watching cell cameras and get ready for a card pull. I'm gonna rotate cards on all the cameras. It'll take me a few days, but starting up in Illinois and working my way back, I'll do a card rotation starting next week. So hopefully. I've been kind of disappointed so far. I don't have a shooter yet, but still looking.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to be putting a few cameras out early in the week, and then my youngest daughter is getting married on Friday, so we'll have a wedding rehearsal on Thursday and a wedding on Friday. And then I'm pretty much free the rest of summer.
All right. Well, why don't you go ahead and take us out, and good luck at the wedding. I hope you make a good speech.
Well, I've been practicing, so. All right, we want to thank our sponsors, BuyAFarm.com, 360 Hunting Blinds, Victory Chevrolet, Real World Wildlife Products, Vortex Optics, WildlifeFarming.com, Quiet Cat, Matthews, Lone Wolf, and Vengeance Camo. Hope you all have a great week. See you next week.